All right, folks. So I think we'll get started. I'm sure there'll be a few slowpokes joining us in the meantime. Thanks a lot for joining us for this month's AKS Community Call for our India and APAC time zone folks. Thanks for those of you who've joined us today. My name's Simon Waite. I'm a Fleet Product Manager as part of the AKS team. And today I'm joined by Raul, who is one of the AKS PMs focusing on various parts of the AKS ecosystem. All right, as promised, more people joining just as we kick things off. So thanks a lot for joining us for our second one of these calls for today. Appreciate your time. Let's dive in. So today, just to let you know before we start things off, we will be recording today's call and it'll be up on the AKS YouTube channel in the not too distant future. So please bear that in mind. It is a public forum, so if you are part of an organisation that has an NDA with Microsoft, please don't talk about NDA content here. We are interested in growing the audience, particularly for this time zone. We've had folks ask to have a more time zone friendly one of these versus the one that happens in the US and Europe time zones. So please help spread the word on this. We don't require you to register. You can rock up and join the call at any point in time. Feel free to use the chat to ask any questions. We'll come off mute at the end of today's session. So if you've got anything you prefer to ask verbally, you can certainly do that later on. Always open to feedback as well. So please feel free to ping us at any time on ways to improve this and add value to our community. As always, it's an open space, so please be mindful of how you interact with others, consider other people's opinions and perspectives, and we encourage you to interact in that way with other folks when you're joining the call. Today, we're going to do a quick run through of what's coming up at Build, which is late May, 19th to 22nd. Quick look at the AKS labs on the Microsoft Reactor. So for the folks in this time zone, it's probably not as applicable as it is in other time zones, but you can still access that content post those sessions with the Reactor crew. We have our community content spotlight. I will say right now, we'd love to see more content from the folks on this call. So if you've got content that you're producing that's related to AKS or Fleet or one of the associated cloud native offerings in Azure, please fill in the form that we'll provide the link to later, because we'd love to be able to highlight it on the call and give you a call out for the great work that you're doing. We have Chase Wilson, who's the PM for a bunch of the AKS networking components, is joining us today. So it is a pre-recorded session of about 10 minutes with Chase talking through a much sought after feature, which is the API VNet integration. So he's going to walk us through that to quite a high level of detail. If you do have questions about that, Raul's here today. He's got some familiarity with that space, so he is available to answer any questions. And as always, if we can't answer them on the spot, we'll take them on advisement, and we're happy to get back to you with those answers as and when we can. And then finally, we'll just do a quick run through of some GA and preview items on the AKS and Fleet roadmaps. Hopefully that sounds good. Without further ado, let's hop into it. So Build is coming up. It is in Seattle and online. For most of the folks on this call, I'm guessing it'll probably be an online experience. You can go ahead and register for Build online. The registrations are now open. And I've done a quick search link there. So if you want to go and find AKS related sessions at Build, that's one way to find them. There will probably be other cloud native Kubernetes sessions available as well. But if you're looking for the shortcut to find anything to do with AKS, please follow that link on the screen. Happy to chuck it in the chat as well if anyone needs those details later. Reactor team is also running AKS live labs. They'll be starting in May. They are obviously in the Pacific time zone. So for the folks here in Australia, that's definitely a very early hour of the day. So it's unlikely you'll be going along to that in person, but you can obviously register if you do want to go along. They will be available as recordings post the actual live event itself. So there is still some value in following along if you want to get up to speed with certain aspects of working with AKS. Community content spotlight. All right. As I said, we do want to see more content from folks on this call. So if yourself or someone that you know is producing great content, please get them to follow that link at the bottom there. So ms/AKS/community content. And we will do a regular review of those. So just like last month, this month, our community content spotlight is going to one of our MVP community. So Jürgen Aluen for his great content on looking at networking using eBPF with AKS. So definitely, if it's a space that you're focused on or wanting to do more with, definitely go and have a read of Jürgen's blog post. It's quite detailed in its approach to things, and it is a space that we do see a lot of interest in. I don't know, Raul, if you had any thoughts on this space, any inputs that you wanted to give on that. I mean, you work in this space. I don't know what your take on this is.
Yeah, we're very excited about eBPF and the improvements it's bringing to AKS, especially if you're using CNI Cilium with Cilium, then you are able to get a lot better scale and a lot more control over your AKS clusters. And I read this blog post and it's very interesting. It talks about all of these things and also how you can set up Cilium in order to get a complete control over your network. So yeah, highly recommend everyone to read this.
And that's why it's the community content spotlight for this month. So yeah, please feel free to go ahead and submit your content. If you do need us to put any of the links in the chat before we wrap up today's call, please just do flag it in the chat and we can do that for you. We're going to hop on to a deep dive on API VNet integration with Chase. So as I said, this is a pre-recorded video, but Chase does an amazing job. I've watched this video and I thoroughly enjoyed it. So it doesn't quite get to those sort of glass wall type drawings that I've seen a few folks do, like Brendan Burns when he talks about the fundamentals of Kubernetes, but Chase is pretty much up there. So I think you're going to enjoy this. I'm hoping that the audio comes through. If you don't hear any audio on this video, please do flag it and I'll reshare it, but I'm hoping that this will work. And Raul and myself will be back. We'll be online and looking for comments. So if you've got any questions out of this video, please do go ahead and post them in the chat. But it's about 10 minutes and we'll be back right after that to dig into what's coming up on the GA and preview roadmap. So without further ado, over to Chase, who's got this really cool workshop that, you just like, it's got those 3D printing things in the back and all sorts of stuff. So without further ado, over to you, Chase.
Hello everyone, my name is Chase. I'm a PM on the AKS team. I focus primarily on networking, and that's why I'm here today to talk to you about a long-awaited feature that is not new, but it has been coming out for a long time. Hopefully we're hitting GA, and that is API server VNet integration. And if you don't know what that is, don't worry, we're going to give an overview and we'll also give a little demo. If you do know about it, then hopefully you'll enjoy this as a little refresher and get ready for the coming GA. Okay, to start this off, we're going to run a couple of commands just to kick it off, and then we'll go into an overview. All right, so I cheated a little bit, and we actually already have one cluster created. This is not an API server VNet integration enabled cluster. It's just a private cluster, and I'm going to create two clusters right now, one of them being an API server VNet integration cluster. Create name test2 group test, and it is also going to be a private cluster. All right, so we're going to kick one of those off. All right, and we're also going to create just one completely basic cluster. So now that we have those clusters started, we're actually going to take a step back, cover some basics, and talk about what API server VNet integration is. The first thing I want to cover is a public and private cluster because it's going to come up here and make sure everyone's on the same page. First off, a public and a private cluster don't mean that you're like either completely accessible or cut off. In AKS, a public or private cluster is talking about how you or your nodes and pods are going to access your API server. So for a public cluster, you're actually accessing the API server over a public endpoint. Now, this doesn't mean it's completely open. You can cut it off. You can restrict it to certain IP address ranges, things like that. So there are ways to restrict it, or a private cluster. And a private cluster uses PLS and private endpoints to connect to the API server. Now, we're going to actually take a look here and see what that looks like in a diagram real quick. So you can see your AKS cluster boundary right here. Now, in a normal cluster, this is not API server VNet integration enabled. I am going to get really good at saying that. This is a, within a normal setup here, you actually have two VNets. The first one is yours. This is your cluster VNet. And within this VNet, you have your pods, your nodes going on and all that. And you actually have a second Microsoft-owned and managed VNet right here. And that's the API server, where the API server lives. Now, communication happens over either a private endpoint or a public endpoint. And now it's either using PLS, private link service, or it's not using anything. Okay, I have to correct myself here real quick. When you're going over a public endpoint, there still is connectivity tunnel. It's not NATA. Connectivity tunnel is done away with API server VNet integration, but it's still there. So forget the NATA, that's incorrect. So all traffic coming out of here and going to your API server, or you reaching out to your API server, is going to be over these connection points right here. Now this is opposed to an API server VNet integration enabled cluster. You have the same cluster boundary. You have one single VNet, and instead of seeing these two VNets, you have two subnets. The first one is going to have your nodes, so you have your node subnet holding all your pods and nodes. Now, as you'll notice here, it's a little bit simpler. You have no PLS and you don't have a public endpoint. This is only for node traffic and pod traffic, but if you're reaching over it, you're still going to be reaching out to it over a public endpoint. But here, you can see the secondary subnet right here where API server lives. You can see traffic going here, and instead of traversing over a public endpoint, and even though it's over a public endpoint in the private cluster, it's still in the Microsoft backbone. So don't worry, it's not like it's going out, traversing the internet or anything. It's still within the Microsoft background or backbone. But in this case, you don't even have to worry about all this traffic going there. There's a couple of scenarios where that's really useful. One, it's more secure. Two, within an NSG or within a VNet, you can use NSGs to restrict traffic, and I'm always like that. Now also, if you get your cluster to scale and you require something like NAT Gateway has a funny way of working, maybe not a funny way of working, but all traffic in this scenario, with the exception of private endpoints. So let's say you have a public endpoint or a public cluster, and you're using NAT Gateway. All traffic going to your API server, so all node traffic going to your API server, will go traverse the public endpoint. And with that, it will be charged as NAT Gateway public traffic. With this moves around that entirely. That's no longer traversing NAT Gateway. That's not getting natted that way or anything like that. And you don't have to worry about extra cost or anything that way. So we've gone over the diagram, and now we're going to give a little bit of a demo just to see what this looks like in practice. So here you can see that we have the MC test group, which is where your VNets are going to live. So we're going to take a look at this one, and we're going to take a look at the VNet in here. All right, now this is a nifty little tool, and you're going to see the topology of your VNet right here. You can see you have the VNet, you have your AKS subnet, and within this you see your node pools, but you also see a couple other things. You see your private endpoint right here, and you see this NIC here where the interface is. You can see the private IP assigned to connect to your Kube API server. This doesn't mean that your API server is living here. It's just reflective that it's connected to the API server, but it's actually everything is traversing over this private endpoint right here. Now, let's take a look at the other one. Okay, so for the second one, we're going to look at test 2. And in test 2, this one is API server VNet integration enabled. And let's take a look at this VNet. This is also a private cluster. So as you can see, you have your AKS VNet here just as well. You still have an AKS subnet with your node spool living here. Remember, this is API server VNet integration enabled. Now you suddenly have an AKS API server subnet of 10.226 and a /28, so giving you 16 IP addresses. This is where your API server is. Unlike the other one, this doesn't go over a private endpoint. You can see this is a private cluster, but it's no longer traversing that way. It has its own dedicated subnet right here. Now we're going to take a look at a normal cluster. So completely basic, not private, it's public and no API or VNet integration enabled at all. Now you can see the AKS subnet in the VNet, node pools right here, and just go out completely. So you're only reaching out through a public endpoint. You don't see any API server, VNet, or anything like that, which means that you're not going to have, it's going to still hit the public endpoint, stay within Microsoft's backbone, but still hitting that point for any node traffic. Okay, now you could just take my word for it, but we're actually going to run some commands to verify that traffic from a pod is going to resolve to an API server, or how it's going to resolve to that. So in the command above, I got some of our FQDNs for our API servers, and what we're going to do is actually we're going to create a pod and get it running in here, and we're going to verify that this pod resolves to the API server and then see where it gets it from. All right, we have our pod created, and now we're going to run our test. So as you can see, we have DNS utils, and we're going to look up that first FQDN to see how it resolves to our API server. There we go. Okay, so now this is the address that resolves to. And if you'll remember that, scroll down here, and you can see 10.224.0.4. This is the exact one that we're getting here. So we're hitting that private endpoint, which is great. That's what it's supposed to do. Okay, now we're going to test this out on another one. So for the next one, we have to do the same thing. We've got to create a pod over in our test group 2. Still going to keep this up, keep it running. Normally you should clean up your resources. This isn't good habits, but that's okay. All right, we've got our pod started and ready. Should be ready to go now. So what I'm going to do, we're going to run this same thing again, but with the updated FQDN, and this should resolve to the private IP. All right, so we've got our test back, and now we resolve to 10.226.0.4. Let's go ahead and take a look back at this one here. We're back in our updated the test 2. This is the VNet here. And let's zoom in just a little bit here. AKS VNet as a whole. This subnet right here is the virtual network. That's not it. Subnet here. You can see 10.224.0.0/16. That doesn't line up with the one right there. However, when we go over to this little guy right here, now we hit 10.226.0.0 and a /28. Just confirming we are back right here with 10.226.0.4. Woo, quite a mouthful. Probably from saying API server VNet integration too many times. With that, you can see that you're resolving correctly into your API server, either through the public endpoint, private endpoint, or an API server VNet integration directly into the same VNet from a different subnet, which is awesome. With that, thank you all very much. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned a little something, and can't wait to get your feedback. Thanks, and have a good one.
All right, that was a great video. Chase does a really good job of running through that end to end. Didn't see any questions come up on the chat while that video was playing through, but did want to give folks an opportunity, if they did have any questions, to chuck them in the chat, or we can get to them later once we've done a run through of what's coming up for preview and GA. So give folks a few seconds if they want to type anything into the chat. Otherwise, we'll get into what's new and coming soon with AKS and Fleet. Need like a virtual gavel in these meetings so you can, it's like going once, going twice, bang. Don't have any of those little dots at the bottom of the chat either. Someone madly typing away. Do you have that, Raul, when someone madly types away and then the next thing they spend 5 minutes typing away and then the only response you get is okay?
Okay, yeah. All the time.
I probably do a lot of those myself. All right. Okay, so there's no questions coming in there. This next section, we're going to go through some GA items, some items that will be GA soon, and some items that are in public preview that might be GA soon. As always, any timelines and ship dates that we might talk about are subject to change, and we provide them in good faith. So if things don't ship, because sometimes they do slip a little bit, please don't hold us to it. Yes, who would like to press the button? Yeah, there used to be like a bang, just like, that's the emergency shift everything to AKS button. It's like everything's broken, shift to AKS, because we know AKS will help you solve all the problems you've got. Not really, but that's okay. All right, GA items. Let's hop in here. There are a few. I've picked some key ones out of the backlog at the moment. That roadmap link that's there, that's on the screen, will take you to the AKS public roadmap, which lives up on GitHub. Fleet stuff is also mixed in there as well, although we do have our own standalone roadmap that if you're focused on multi-cluster, you can go and have a look at. These are some ones that I thought were worth talking to. You know, Microsoft's obviously been very heavily focused over the last little while on security, and as part of the Secure Future Initiative, or SFI, I've been focusing very heavily across the whole organization on security, you know, as a first principle. And this first one, the AKS Security Bulletin and CVE mitigation status, is kind of a public recognition of that from the AKS world. We continue to do more work in this space, but as a AKS user, you can now go and look at the security bulletin and the mitigation status info through public channels. So the security bulletins are up on Microsoft Learn, so I can post a link to those. Although if you go to the GitHub roadmap and look at that item number that's there in that bubble, it will give you the links to it. And the release tracker now includes the CVE mitigation status as well. So I think the most recent one of those, Raoul, if I stand corrected, was to do with Nginx. Was there a big CVE in Nginx? Was the last one that's kind of bubbled through. So I think you'll find that one at the top of the list for sure. Another key thing that AKS does is we help customers who need to stay on Kubernetes minor versions for longer than the standard community support. We offer a thing called long-term support, or LTS. That's typically for a 12-month period after community support ends, and Microsoft will maintain patches for that minor version through until end of life. So we've just recently announced that Kubernetes 128 is our most recent long-term support release, and it will be supported through until February of next year. Keep an ear out for additional announcements around LTS pretty soon. I think we'll have some stuff on this at Build. So if LTS is something that you or your organization are interested in, certainly more coming from the LTS standpoint as well. Azure Portal deployment recommendations. This is an interesting one. So oftentimes you might face deployment challenges because SKUs or regions, SKUs might not be available, certain VM SKUs might not be available in certain regions, either due to quota or capacity issues. With this new deployment recommendations capability in the portal, when a deployment is about to be executed, we'll actually go away and check what the availability looks like for the default SKUs or the SKUs you've specified for a deployment, and where there could be a reduced chance of success, we'll make recommendations around other regions or alternative SKUs that you can deploy to help increase the chances of success. As you might imagine, it's a never-ending quest to answer how much capacity is available. So it's not a guarantee that the deployment will succeed, but it's a guide to increasing the chances of success where you're maybe in a resource-constrained region at any given time. So that's available GA inside the portal now when you go to deploy. Again, if you go and have a look at the GitHub issue attached to that, there's a screenshot and a sample and a link to the docs that talks about it as well. So I think the app routing ingress one was something that you were going to have a chat about, Raoul, was it?
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, I find it very interesting when these small features, when they come to life, which make the lives of our customers so easy. So if you have Nginx running on your cluster for ingress, you must use app routing add-ons. It takes away so many of the overheads that come with managing an ingress solution on your cluster. So it connects to Key Vault for certificate rotation, and it connects to Azure DNS for DNS resolution. It connects to the load balancer as well. So you don't have to manage all of that. So one of the common asks was to integrate app routing in add-on with private internal load balancer. So for clusters that don't need to have public access, the traffic can be routed to it via the add-on. And this is one of the things that is coming to life very, very soon.
Okay. Yeah, there's lots of work going on in this space. As you would have seen through Chase's video, it can get quite complicated quite quickly when you start doing a lot of work with Azure networking, because obviously Azure networking is not just built for AKS, it's built for lots of things inside of Azure. And certainly once you start to get into entirely private networked environments, which is not uncommon in many large customers, you start to have interesting cases that each of the engineering teams has to work through. So when we start to see things like being able to decrease the complexity of deploying what is actually under the covers quite complex configurations, then that's a win for people who are working with AKS that maybe want to do load balance services. And certainly Fleet has to deal with that with multi-cluster networking as well. Just focusing on the cost optimization. So this is surfaced through Azure Advisor. So it'll actually look at the state of your clusters and make some recommendations on how you can optimize the costs using things like the VPA or the vertical pod autoscaler. So you can configure your AKS clusters to get, to achieve optimization of the cost of running those clusters. I think that's, alongside security, that's probably one of the major requests from customers is help us be secure and lower cost. So being able to do that via Azure Advisor is certainly a benefit. If you're not using Advisor today, definitely go and have a look at it and enable Advisor recommendations for your subscriptions and for your clusters. The AKS node subnet eBPF data plane. So basically, this change will add compatibility for node subnet support, and this will apply only to new AKS deployments. So if you want to use the subnet eBPF data plane, you do need to currently deploy a new AKS cluster. In future, there will be support for being able to upgrade existing clusters to support this. But today, if you want to try this out, you need to go and stand up a new AKS cluster to access that capability. And I think
this brings,
yes, go for it.
This brings the node subnet at parity with the CNI overlay and CNI pod subnet, which are the other two ways in which you can get IP addresses assigned to nodes and pods. So each of these classes have their own use cases, and this kind of brings everything together. So irrespective of how you want the IP address assignment to be done, you have the same set of features available throughout. Which is what I like about this feature, really.
Did you want to pick up the Cilium one as well while you're going?
Yeah, sure. So the dual stack support on Cilium overlay. So for people who are not aware of what overlay networking is like, so in a sense, it helps you access a bigger pool of IP addresses. So even if so, you can assign a set of IP addresses to the nodes, but then assign IP addresses to your pods from a separate side of space. That way, you have a very large pool of IP addresses to use without having to actually create a subnet or access the same subnet as where your nodes live. And our Cilium solution is coming up with dual stack support, which means that you would be able to assign both IPv4 and v6 addresses to both the pods and nodes. It's really great for scenarios where you are actually working on a modernization project where your legacy applications, they're still leveraging IPv4, but for your modernized version of applications, you want to switch to IPv6. So you don't have to deploy 2 copies of the same application at the same time, but rather use the dual stack support in order to leverage both IPv4 and v6 addresses on the same workload. So yeah, again, something that makes the lives of the customers easy. And a lot of work goes on in this modernization space. So this will actually help customers deliver their projects faster and also bring their legacy applications on AKS and modernize them there.
Yep. So I'm just grabbing the docs for Seth Powell, who was asking for them. So I'm just copying that link. I'm going to post it in the chat. So that's the docs from when it shipped in preview, but now it's GA. Seth Powell, have a quick look at that. If that's not the right links, please let me know, and then I can find out, and we'll give an update on the next call on the right link for that. Thanks, Raoul, for covering off the dual stack support there. The Keta version support. So obviously, the typical method for most add-ons to revise their build versions is aligned with Kubernetes minor version updates. So for this one, we've bumped the supported Keta add-on version to Keta 2.16 to address some challenges with scale sets. So this change will mean that if you're using Keta with AKS that's running on Kubernetes 132, that you'll have the right behavior for scale sets that are set to work with Keta. So that's the sort of top 6 items that we've pulled off the roadmap. If you go and have a look at the roadmap on that link, you'll see there's a bunch more. Some of them have been talked about in last month's call. Typically, things sit in GA in that column for 1 or 2 months while they bed in. And then once they've been GA for a little while, they'll shift out of GA into the post-GA lifecycle where they'll just be sitting in an improvement state. Let's talk about some things that are in public preview at the moment. So the top 2 are kind of from my area of the AKS ecosystem. So this is from Fleet Manager. So the Fleet Manager data plane placement solution is offering 2 new features. So we have the ability to control eviction and disruption of workloads that you've placed onto clusters across your fleet. So with the release of eviction and what we've called placement disruption budgets, or PDBs, just to confuse everybody that's used to PDBs at a individual cluster level, we give you the ability to basically control how workloads that have been placed onto particular clusters can be removed from them. So you might do that because you want to take a cluster out of rotation to do some maintenance. So using this new preview feature, you can basically tell the Fleet Manager scheduler to deprovision a particular workload from a cluster, or if in fact you've got a workload that you don't want to be disrupted, you can actually put a disruption budget in place that will block an eviction request for that workload off of a particular cluster. So we're now giving that additional level of control in addition to being able to intelligently place application workloads anywhere throughout your fleet. And then the next one, placement staged update rollouts. So to date, when you run a placement request through the fleet data plane cluster resource placement technology, basically we will pick clusters within your fleet based on the criteria that you set, and then we'll roll those out using a rolling update approach, which is the sort of standard approach that Kubernetes uses for doing upgrades and updates of placed workloads inside of a cluster. With this new preview feature, stage rollouts, we now give you the ability to define the order in which clusters will receive these updates. And it's not specifically that you have to go through and tell us exactly what clusters you want in what order, but you can do things like create groups based on cluster labels and annotations that allows you to determine that your dev clusters might receive a placement before your test clusters, before your production clusters, as an example. So that's also in preview at the moment. and is an optional configuration item that you can use with cluster resource placement, which has been GA for a while now. So they're the two fleet things this month that are in public preview. Happy to see those. Those were announced earlier this month at KubeCon EU. There's a couple of new outbound types for networking for your egress traffic. So you'll be able to set the outbound type to none or block. I don't know, Raul, if you've got any insight on these you might want to talk to.
Yep. Yeah, sure. So essentially, these help you restrict any egress traffic allowed from your AKS cluster. None will help you basically bring your own infrastructure for outbound access. So we won't create any load balancer or egress paths for the AKS cluster. You'll have to configure your own. And block is for clusters that don't want any egress of any kind. So we'll configure NSD rules that don't allow egress traffic from your cluster. So for if your cluster doesn't need to talk to internet, does not need to talk to service anything outside of the cluster itself, you can use block to restrict that access. Previously, both of these scenarios required setting up a cluster and then removing infrastructure such as load balancer or egress controllers from the cluster. Now, we won't create them in the first instance. Can I talk about the second one?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Yeah. So with I already spoke about the overlay support in Azure CNI. Which gives you access to a bigger pool of addresses. The dual stack, which gives you access to both IPv4 and v6 addresses on your nodes and pods. We are now supporting it on Windows nodes as well. So we always try to keep Windows in parity with Linux. So the features that are available on one type of nodes are also available on the other type of nodes. So the feature was already available on Linux. Now it's on Windows too.
Yeah, it's amazing the amount of work going on in that space. A lot more to come as well. Yes. And I'll wrap up with the last one on deployment safeguards. So I don't know if anyone in the attendee list is familiar with deployment safeguards, but they're a great way to manage deployments into AKS, making sure that you're following best practices. So they can do certain things such as that whether or not you can edit a particular node or individual nodes inside of a cluster, whether you're specifying resource constraints when you're doing deployments. A common challenge that we see with clusters being exhausted from resources is, or having challenges with resource overutilization or out of memory kills, is because people aren't specifying any form of resource limits or specifying incorrect resource limits. So deployment safeguards can check all of these things before your workload is deployed into a cluster. So they're currently in preview. And we're looking to GA those sometime before the middle of this year. So definitely go and check out deployment safeguards. I'll chuck the link in the chat as well. It's worth having a look at. But that currently is in preview and is a good way to start enforcing some best practices before you start having challenges with your AKS clusters. So I think that's pretty much it for today's big ticket items. So we had a look at the API server VNet integration with Chase, which was awesome. Some good coverage there and good discussion from Raul. Had a look at GA and preview items. As I said, make sure you register for Build and check out the AKS sessions there. There'll be some good ones. Please, 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 I'm going to chuck the screen back up so you can grab that link again. Make sure that you submit any community content. So if you're doing blogs, maybe you're doing videos, or maybe you know someone who's doing blogs and videos, please, by all means, go ahead and get them to submit there so we can shout out to them. They don't have to be MVPs. If they're interested in becoming an MVP, they can reach out via that MVP link. There's some awesome benefits to becoming an MVP, above and beyond hanging out with cool folks like us at MVP Summit every year, but definitely recommend if you're doing any great work, we want to make sure that we can call it out and highlight it. Let's see if we can't do better than the European and the North American folks with the great content that we can produce. I am going to unmute. I see there's a couple of questions in the chat. I'm going to unmute everybody. So if you did want to come off mute and ask your questions, just give me a second here because there is some magic I need to do. I need to do allow mic for attendees. So anyone who's on the call should be able to come off mute if they've got a question and ask away, and I'll see how little Rahul and I can answer those questions, but go for it.
Hi, Simon. Rahul Satpal here.
Yes, hi.
Yeah. So currently the user assigned manage identity, the federated identities can be created. I think it's only 20 identities per UMI. Now I have got a requirement where I want to know more than 20 federated identity. I see a feature, extended feature of it, but I'm not really sure that is for UMI or not. Is there any any plan? Is just a suggestion, right? I mean, can be the number of identities can be increased to be used on AKS, or have somebody looked into it from AKS side?
That's a good question. So before I talk out of school, just give me 2 seconds. I'm just having a look at the roadmap here. Just bear with me 1 second.
Yeah, sure.
Just seeing what's actually in our roadmap here. So identity and the limits of identity. So the limit that you called out there around the federated credential stuff. It's definitely something that the team is highly aware of, and it is being looked at the moment. The timeline for addressing that limitation is not something I'm aware of. If you did want, I'm going to put my name, my email address in the chat. Please feel free to drop me an email with that question. I know who the PM is that owns that space. And if you've got specific questions or customer asks for that, we'd certainly be interested to hear about that, maybe as part of a prioritization discussion on addressing that limitation.
Sure.
It's definitely something that I've seen discussed, but I can't talk to A, if we're addressing it, or B, what the timeline is. It's not something I'm involved with at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
A good question.
Okay. Yeah.
I did see Luke.
Thanks, Simon.
Hey, no problems. I saw Luke added a question earlier in the chat around AKS Automatic. Just if you're still on the call, Luke, maybe you want to come off mute and ask that question, because I didn't really understand the specific question about AKS roadmap and alignment and stuff.
Yeah, and as soon as I said it, I was like, that's a pretty dumb question. But so in the roadmap, you had like, okay, there's the K division update and a whole bunch of other things. And so the question was more around, does the roadmap functionality for, those things in your backend, do they differ to what I would be deploying in AKS Automatic deployment scenario, or is it essentially just standard, or it doesn't matter because it's the version that AKS is being deployed, whether it's AKS or standard? Is the roadmap essentially aligned to both? So once the K version is being updated in AKS standard, like if I were to deploy AKS Automatic instance, for example, with that AKS version, would that immediately get the same?
Yeah. So
updates. Yeah.
So let me. And by the way, the only dumb question is the one you don't ask, right? So That actually is a good question. So what your question boils down to is, if I choose Kubernetes 132 and I do that as a standard cluster, and then I do 132 and I do it as an automatic cluster, do I land with the same Keta version, as an example, as an add-on in both those scenarios, or are they?
Yeah, that's right. Is the roadmap essentially the same or different between those two kind of offerings?
That's a good question. I would have to check that out. I know who the PM is. I can ask that question and get an answer for it. I'm not even going to hazard a guess on that. I think I know the answer, but I won't talk out of school on that. AKS Automatic. All I will say is AKS Automatic is designed, I guess, to kind of be the thing that comes with the best practices configurations baked in, with minimum amount of configuration and management required from anybody who deploys it. So, I would take that as my guide in terms of what that might mean for, say, add-ons versus, say, a standard cluster. Again, referring back to the standard way that add-ons revise their releases with each Kubernetes minor, unless there was a really good reason not to, I can't imagine why we wouldn't just ship with whatever the supported minor version is for a particular add-on at any given time. But I'm happy, again, you've got my email address in the chat. If you drop me an email, I can definitely ask the PM for Automatic what the expected behavior is there. I think I know the answer, but I can't say that for sure.
Thank you.
Automatic is a sort of a standard AKS cluster with best practices baked in, and upgrades are one aspect of it, and it automatically updates the Kubernetes version as well as add-ons for you. But yeah, exact details, as Simon said, can come from the people who actually work on it. But that's what my hypothesis is as well, that everything gets bundled with the scheduled automatic updates, and that's how add-ons and the cluster itself gets updated.
Yeah, I think we had a question during last month's call on Automatic as well, and that versus standard. And given that Automatic is meant to be like the best practice, would eventually standard effectively be like an automatic cluster where you can actually then go and customize the cluster once it's deployed. And I think given Automatic is meant to be best practices, theoretically that's where a standard cluster should start its life, as a freshly created cluster. So that probably gives some guidance around that question, but I can absolutely ask the PM for confirmation on that. Any other questions? Got a few minutes left. All right, so I might move to call today's session to a close, but what I would like to highlight is we'll be back again in May. So please keep an eye out on LinkedIn and other channels. Typically, we'll be focused on the same Wednesday. Wednesday today, the same Wednesday every month for the India APAC call. So if you see the reminder for the US and Europe call, typically we will be 1 week after that call. The recordings generally don't go up until after we've had the India APAC call. Obviously, if Chase's call was already out there, we'd probably bore you to tears by playing it again, but we'll be looking to do more of these. So feel free to reach out at any time. Really appreciate your contributions and inputs today, and we'll see you at the next one in May. And Raul, thanks for your help today, and I'll see you again soon as well.
Yep, always a pleasure joining these calls. Thanks all.
Bye for everybody.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.